Greetings ladies and gentlemen, Adrian here. Welcome back to the channel and to another MMORPG new player review, and this time it's for the one and only World of Warcraft. If there's anyone out there that hasn't played World of Warcraft before, then this video is for you. Over the past couple of months, I've leveled up my first character on WoW from 0 to cap for this new player review, and it's been an absolute blast. I'm here to answer questions that players like me who haven't played this MMORPG before might have, like, is it worth the monthly subscription, and what's good and what's bad? Before we begin, here's a brief overview about World of Warcraft for those that may not have heard about this game. WoW was released way back in 2004 and is developed and published by Blizzard Entertainment. The game has been around for 14 years and has seen 6 major expansion releases so far, with the 7th, Battle for Azeroth, coming out later this year, which you can already pre-purchase. So let's get started. Here's my World of Warcraft review from the perspective of a new player. At number 10, let's talk about classes and combat. World of Warcraft has a total of 12 classes to choose from, with 10 of them being basic, and the other 2 being hero classes, which starts at a higher level with a super cool intro storyline to play through. That's a decent amount of classes for an MMO, and that elevates the replay value for new players. Just keep in mind that there are class restrictions for races, so be sure to figure out what you really want to play before committing. For the purpose of this review, I went with a human warrior because I like to melee, and if it sounds like I've just committed to a purely DPS role, the truth is that's not the case. WoW does have the Trinity system whereby DPS, tanks, and healers are required for group content, but some classes are considered hybrids, which simply means they have specializations that allow them to swap roles entirely. For example, 2 of my warrior specializations are for DPS, and the third is for tanking. Other classes like the Warlock can only choose between 3 variations of DPS specializations. So for class progression, players will earn new skills and abilities for their specializations every few levels. In addition to that, there's also the talent system that offers players a choice to pick one of 3 new goodies every 15 levels, and this can be in the form of passive boons or even new skills. You can change both your specs and talents anywhere out in the world as long as you're not in combat. When it comes to the combat system, World of Warcraft is as traditional as it gets. The game uses a tab targeting system, and you'll fire off your class skills from hotbars, which are fully remappable with keybinds, and you can create macros as well. Your skills and spells has a GCD, aka global cooldown, and some skills are not affected by this and have their own individual CDs. Safe to say, if you've had any RPG or MMORPG experience, combat here will be very familiar to you. It's easy to pick up and learn as you go along. In the early levels, combat as a new player will feel somewhat slow, obviously, as you're still a fresh newbie with only a couple of skills, and that does get better the more you level up, of course. What really surprised me was just how engaging the combat evolved to be, especially in the later levels as a melee character too, because you're right in the thick of combat, executing skills, and to me at least, the pacing was great and the animations were fluid, which is surprising coming from a game that's 14 years old now. I have seen and played newer MMOs with way clunkier, stiff, and uninspiring combat animations, and WoW scores some major points here. I can't say the same for ranged or caster classes though, as that is not my preferred playstyle, but I can certainly vouch for melee combat. It's fun. At number 9, let's talk about leveling and progression. Your first steps as a new player in World of Warcraft is figuring out which faction you want to represent, which race and class combo you want to play, and then deciding if you're going to level up the old-fashioned way or use that level 100 or 110 boost you got free from purchasing the expansion. If you really are a new player, I'd highly recommend playing from start to level cap. Yes, it's going to take a while, but the journey is exceptional and needs to be experienced at least once on a character. WoW's leveling progression in general is standard fare. You gain levels from acquiring experience points out in the world from killing things, completing quests, and discovering new places in-game. There's 110 levels to chew through currently, and the cap will be increasing to 120 in the next expansion, Battle for Azeroth. When I started leveling my review character way back in December 2017, leveling was a mixed bag. Every zone had a recommended level range, which helps you navigate between the zones to maximize XP gains. This helps you know when to move on if you're out leveling the content. The problem I had with this was, I could never completely finish all the zone stories and even expansion maps, as I was constantly out-leveling them, and I wanted to move on by choice to ensure I was leveling at a decent pace on my way to level cap. For new players now, this is no longer a concern because as of patch 7.3.5, zone scaling has been introduced, and it's an absolutely fantastic change, especially for new players, as now every zone in the game scales to your level, ensuring that you get the most out of your questing experience. These apply to zone dungeons as well. Rewards do scale too, so your efforts of staying around or being that completionist in a zone will be rewarded. Another thing to note is that the difficulty also has increased slightly with zone scaling. At the very beginning, I was literally one-shotting enemy mobs regardless of the gear I had on. 7.3.5 has rebalanced the scales, giving mobs more HP to burn, so you definitely won't be killing things in one hit and face rolling at the early levels if that's important to you as a new player. So that's character levels and progressions, and keep in mind classes do have its own progressions and specs, and we've already covered that in the last point. Beyond that, World of Warcraft offers you a whole bunch of systems to progress with, some coming early in the game while others are introduced only when you hit a certain expansion. Let's start with the basics and move on from there. First up, let's cover gear progression. Yes, equipment and weapons are a big part of WoW, as with any other MMORPG. Heck, we all love the loot. In the early game, in my experience, new players won't have to bother too much about getting the best weapons on the leveling journey. Gear drops from trash mobs, quest completion rewards, and of course from zone dungeons, and the latter is my preferred suggestion for gearing up along the way. As mentioned earlier, leveling isn't that punishing if you aren't well geared, but do make it a habit to seek out blue rares from zone story arc chains, dungeons, and keep your overall gear updated as you move along to level cap. Things will drastically change by the time you hit WoW's 5th expansion, however, and the difficulty overall increases somewhat in the Warlords of Draenor expansion. Because you're moving on swiftly as a new player, you wouldn't have spent that time, a period of 2 years or more, grinding out the best gear from the raids and endgame content of the previous expansion. And you're more than likely coming into the new expansion with whatever leveling gear you've picked up along the way. You'll have to quickly readjust that and start thinking about gear from here on out. The good news is, from Draenor onwards, there's multiple ways to get great gear thanks to new systems such as treasure hunts, garrisons, and of course, all the new scalable dungeon loot as well. At the current level cap in the Legion expansion is where things get really interesting for new players who are looking for the current endgame gear treadmill, and that comes in the form of artifact weapons. It's going to take you 98 or so levels to get them, but they are worth it. Artifact weapons are specialization-specific weapons in Legion that grow in power as you play through the expansion. You can customize its appearance in addition to improving class abilities via earning and spending artifact power, which is easier for new players to obtain now thanks to various catch-up mechanics in Legion. Artifact weapons is a really cool system. You definitely get the sense that it grows with you, and there's some awesome storytelling involved when you're given missions to go acquire them at the start of the expansion. They also knock out the usual grind of having to look for new weapons every so often. The downside is that as a new player, you only have a few months left to enjoy them, as they are being retired come the new expansion. In the upcoming Battle for Azeroth expansion, however, there will be another system like it in the form of Legacy Armor, which you can already start getting if you have pre-purchased Battle for Azeroth. Outside of character and gear progressions, World of Warcraft has other things you can soak your teeth into as well. For starters, let's look at guilds. WoW's guild system offers a whole lot more than just being a social tab for like-minded folk. When starting or joining a guild, you'll notice that you can earn reputation with your guild, and at the max rep tier, you can pick up some sweet rewards such as mounts, pets, and heirloom gear. That's great for individual players, but what about as a collective? Guilds do have purposes and common goals to work for as well in the form of achievements. Knocking out some raid achievements, for example, will unlock a unique mount for the entire guild that can be purchased from the guild vendors. And then of course there's crafting as well. WoW has several crafting professions to pursue, and they can be broken down into two categories, gathering and creating. Each character you have can take on two primary professions in the form of herbalism, mining, skinning, alchemy, blacksmithing, enchanting, engineering, leatherworking, tailoring, jewel crafting, or inscription. as well as however many secondary professions such as cooking, fishing, first aid, and archaeology. As a new player, maxing out your chosen professions may be a grind, but there are benefits of course, as some of these, especially gathering, can yield profits in gold at max level if you consistently advance your profession skills as you level. There are arguments that professions are useless in current endgame, and to some extent, I haven't had to worry about them as most of my gear while leveling has come from the landscape or dungeon drops. But I can confirm that selling my gathered materials does bring in the gold, so that choice is down to you. What's cool is that the upcoming expansion will squash profession skill points down to 100, so it doesn't seem as hard to catch up on and max out crafting professions moving forward. And if that's not enough things for you to work on, then you should get stuck into WoW's hybrid horizontal passive progression systems in the form of garrisons and class halls. Garrisons were introduced in Warlords of Draenor and serves as your base of operations in the expansion, allowing players to build and customize their own instance town where you can reap the benefits of your adventures in Draenor. You'll pick up followers along the way, which you can then send out on passive time-based missions to level them up, gather garrison resources, and for making some gold as well. In the Legion expansion, Blizzard introduced class halls, which shares many similarities with garrisons, but it's a heck of a lot cooler for a few reasons. Firstly, every class in the game will get its own class hall that players can access from several hubs. Moreover, they're no longer the solitary experience that garrisons were. You're essentially sharing your class hall with other players, and you can see them chilling around and stuff. The progressions within your class hall, however, belongs to you only, and you'll play through a class campaign filled with pretty good quests with storylines to build your class hall with improvements that will help you out in the Broken Isles. You'll gather champions for more passive time-based missions, improve your artifact weapons, and a lot more. These two systems are great for making gold, I'm told, as well, and I'm still sticking with it today and doing as much as I can before battle for Azeroth. And if you still feel you won't be busy enough with the things to work on in WoW, then check out your achievements panel. WoW has a few thousand achievements to collect, which gives you achievement points for bragging rights, which you can show off on the forums, on top of getting cool titles and rewards in-game. Even as a new player, nothing's stopping me from going back to the older expansions and soloing old raids for mounts and achievements. So if you're new and are a junkie when it comes to achievements, it's pretty easy to go back and complete what you want when you want. I think it's fair to say that as a new player in 2018, you are always going to be progressing your character in some form or another as you play, as everything mentioned above will be gradually introduced to you, and some of them are still relevant to max out today. And you know, I haven't even mentioned things like reputation grinds, Pathfinder achievements for flying in the near zones, and a lot more. There's just so much that your character can work towards progressing, which is really cool. Moving on now, let's talk about World of Warcraft's presentation and performance. When it comes to graphics, there are large parts of the early game in the vanilla zones that shows the game's age. Textures aren't great to look at, as things from foliage to rock and mountain ranges in the distance all look pretty bland. Having said that, you can notice the difference and increase in aesthetics as you move toward the current expansion. In Legion, for example, the draw distance is better, and the zone is designed in a way to accentuate the gorgeous environments and vistas. Character models too seems to have been given a facelift in recent times, which is great, and that definitely adds a modern touch to this classic MMORPG. World of Warcraft scores cookie points for its soundtrack too. The music in this game is fantastic, and the composers keep upping the quality with each expansion I've played through. It's pretty awesome hearing the different scores that are so appropriate to the races, zones, and cultures that we the players are currently experiencing and questing in, and that's more evident in areas like Mists of Pandaria onwards. The music also pairs really well with all the cutscenes and cinematics that WoW puts out for its newer content, and it's a much better presentation package overall from when I started playing through the early content. The one area that has given me issues though is the game's optimization. Even with a pretty decent gaming rig, I can never get World of Warcraft to run at a higher than usual frame rate, and the difference between running at the graphics setting presets from 4 to 6 does very little for me, and only seem to push my rig to work harder for no visual or FPS benefits at all. This, I suspect, is down again to the game's age, and that's definitely a thing to consider, that while the graphics and aesthetics get better over time, under the hood, the game struggles to keep up with newer hardware and players that want to run on max settings. The good news is, at least the game is still highly playable and accessible by a range of computers, so you can play this on a potato if you really need to and don't care about the graphics and visuals at all. At number 7, it's cash shop time. RNG loot boxes, pay to progress, and pay to win items have always been a controversial topic for MMORPGs, regardless of what payment model the game uses, even more so for gaming in general over the last year. To World of Warcraft's credit, the cash shop is just there, and it's pretty barren. Because you've bought the game and you are paying a monthly subscription, you'll find none of the microtransaction drama and BS that other games deal with. The large majority of items in here are cosmetic in nature, ranging from mounts to pets, which are great, and they're all optional. It's just another avenue for players to support the game if they want to, and the cash shop is where you go to pick up a WoW token if you want to sell that for gold, or to pick up a character boost. Other than that, it's unobtrusive and there's nothing in there that offers players any form of gear progression whatsoever. Thumbs up. Number 6. Content. What does World of Warcraft offer in terms of content? The answer is plenty, and there's just so much to do and cover as a new player that it can be overwhelming in a good way. Here's the major things you can expect to be doing in Azeroth. Questing is obviously the game's bread and butter content. WoW has over 3,000 quests at present time, and as a new player, you definitely won't see and do it all on one character on your first playthrough. So what's the questing like? Are they fun or boring grindfests? In the early levels in the vanilla zones, questing will feel basic and rudimentary, which should be expected. It was made a long time ago, and the idea is to help new MMO players get accustomed to the genre with simple fetch and kill quests that involves lots of back and forth too, as WoW zones are pretty big to cover on foot, and new players won't get a mount until level 20. The MMO is definitely a theme park game, which means you should expect to see quest hub crawls where progression from area to area will feel natural as you complete quests along the way. What made the questing enjoyable for me are of course the zone stories and the fun characters you meet that helps mitigate that bland questing factor. Where World of Warcraft shines with its early questing is the unorthodox mechanics you'll come across to complete quest objectives, in the form of minigames like riding tanks to shoot stuff and flying dragons and a bunch of other cool things that for its time seemed pretty clever and out of the box. As the content progresses into newer expansions, the questing in World of Warcraft definitely gets better and more diversified with varied quest objectives that do make sense. At present expansion, the questing has evolved to be a catalyst for the overall story, and it's more cohesive than ever as you definitely feel that the questing is moving the expansion story along in tandem with other progressions you have ongoing, such as artifact weapons and class hall campaigns. The newer expansions also introduces zonal content such as bonus objectives and world quests that further elevates the PvE landscape offering, letting players do pretty much whatever they want for XP, gear, reputation, and other rewards. As for group content, if you love dungeons and raids, World of Warcraft definitely delivers. Every zone from vanilla to the Legion expansion comes with dungeons, which are 5-player group runs featuring trash mobs, multiple boss fights, and of course loot. And there's so many of them. I jumped into dungeons as often as I could while I was leveling, as they're pretty good for XP and they do offer gold and bags of gear for rewards when you queue for random dungeons. The dungeons ranging from level 15 to 50 are of course the game's vanilla content, which is for the most part tank and spank, but the overall quality of the dungeon designs gets better as usual with the newer content. They've also become a great resource for wrapping up zone stories, which is pretty rewarding. Of course, there are different difficulties for the dungeons ranging from normal to heroic, and there's even mythic dungeons now, which is a new mode that offers players an endlessly scaling 5-player dungeon where the group competes against a timer. Other group content includes scenarios, which got introduced in the Mists of Pandaria expansion. Scenarios lets you queue up for instanced PvE content to play with a group, and I hope we see more scenarios moving forward. And finally, there's the raids. Raiding is a big part of World of Warcraft and a large reason why players play the game. It's the ultimate endgame progression and challenge, and a great way to get the best loot and rewards for guilds. WoW has close to 40 raids in-game currently, and while some of the classic raids do not scale, new players can still play them for rewards and achievements. And hey, you can solo the really old stuff if you want to. The current raids is where the fun is at, and unfortunately, at the end of my leveling for this review, I do not have sufficient item level to check out the new raids, so stay tuned to my channel. I do intend to gear up and check out the endgame and raids for more content. But I do like that there's a dedicated raid finder or LFR for new players in the event you cannot find a guild to take you on one. With that out of the way, what's the next best thing in terms of basic MMORPG content? PvP! World of Warcraft also caters to us rowdy folks with a bunch of PvP game modes. As a new player, you can queue up for PvP as early as level 10 and enter the random battlegrounds, which features 10 vs 10 alliance vs horde groups on a variety of maps that has different objectives such as capturing flags, point capping, and a bunch more. These are pretty fun to do while leveling, as they do test your class knowledge and abilities against real players, and just like dungeons, they're great for breaking the questing monotony. Is PvP balanced though? Gear matters, but not by a huge margin. An equipped item level is important in determining your effectiveness. But for me, jumping in with leveling gear, I've still managed to be competitive enough without feeling like I'm at a disadvantage against other geared players. This changes at the level cap, however, and getting or grinding gear for PvP will be important if you really want to be competitive. Also keep in mind that at level cap, PvP unlocks a new progression system called the Honor System, which grants you unique abilities and stuff the more you PvP. So it's great to know that there's something to work toward if you exclusively enjoy PvP. At higher levels, you'll unlock more PvP modes such as raided battlegrounds, war games, small-scale arena skirmishes, and PvP brawls. I haven't done them all, but I do expect to stream a lot of these on my Twitch channel on Fridays. If that hasn't whet your appetite, World of Warcraft does have seasonal events and festivals too, and the in-game calendar UI element is a good way to see what events are coming. I've done a couple of festivals like the Dark Moon Fair and the Christmas event, which are cool side quest type things to do, to pursue for fun rewards, and there's a lot more that I haven't even seen yet. And if that still isn't enough for you, get this: Pet Battles. If you like Pokemon, you're gonna love Pet Battles. I could not believe how fleshed out this system was. You can collect all manner of pets and critters out on the landscape, do battle with them against other pet battle trainers, other players, or wild pets to earn experience points for them. And your pets do gain new skills up until the pet cap of level 20. And you know what? It works due to a well thought out strength and weakness mechanic just like Pokemon has, where certain pets and its attacks cancels out one another. What's really cool is that since its introduction, the game has gone back and added all types of pet trainer quests, items, and wall pets to the zones, and as a new player, it's just something you can do either concurrently while leveling or after you hit the cap. It's optional and it's fun, and you gotta catch them all, right? Ultimately though, I believe World of Warcraft offers something for everyone, for folks of different playstyles, and for those that are both new to MMOs and to VATs as well. For new players, there's a lot to soak in, and my advice is to not try and do everything at once. Never mind food coma, this is content coma and I like it. The real question is, how will you be spending your 1 month sub? Take your pick. At number 5, player community. As someone who's never played World of Warcraft prior to this review, one of the things I'm always hearing about the game is its community, and not in a positive light. I've been told and have read the many accounts of toxic players ruining the fun and enjoyment for everyone else in most aspects of the game. So in my 2 months of leveling, I was looking forward to seeing if that's what my experience was going to be. And I have to say, 9 times out of 10, my experience with other players in game has been great. The thing about communities in MMORPGs is that everyone will undoubtedly have a different experience with them, as there's so many factors that determines that outcome. Are you on a PvE or PvP server? Are you in the right guild? Are you pugging everything? And are you actively looking for trouble? I play primarily solo, and whenever I'm forced to pug dungeons, the only unpleasant thing I've encountered is just the general impatience of folks who pug, and won't hesitate to vote to kick you out if they think you're not pulling your weight. And if you think about it, it's pretty fair since that voting system exists. So to mitigate that, just say you're new and it's your first time through this dungeon. And the same old advice for any MMORPG out there remains. If you're a new player, please take your time and research the servers, find the right guilds on the right time zones for the right playstyle, and I guarantee you the community in general will not be as bad as you've heard. Number 4. Blizzard's ecosystem. One thing that really sticks out to me when I think of WoW and Blizzard when looking at it from the bigger picture is just how everything is connected so seamlessly. And as a new player, you're not just part of an MMORPG, but a larger ecosystem that's constantly growing, evolving, and changing for the benefit of players and fans. I'm not sure if new players are aware of just how much of this game and its world actually exists beyond the MMO if you're really looking to lose yourself in it. There's plenty of convenience type stuff too. For example, there's a couple of mobile device apps that is super cool and convenient if you're already hooked to the game. The WoW Armory, which you can get from the App Store and Google Play, is a free companion app that allows you to do cool things like browse in-game items, see the auction house, and even chat with your guildmates through your phone. There's a second app for the Legion expansion simply called WoW, which is also free, and this one allows you to manage your class hall missions, followers, upgrades, and even browse which world quests are available for you to do once you get home. I like and do appreciate things like this, as not a lot of MMOs have that level of connectivity in-game and out. And beyond that, Blizzard is Blizzard. It's an established name in gaming entertainment, and WoW players are able to enjoy not only what the devs have in store for WoW, but for its other games as well. There's the super cool annual BlizzCon, which is Blizzard's flagship game convention, usually held in November every year to highlight new projects and, in WoW's case, upcoming expansion announcements and other cool stuff like esport tournaments featuring World of Warcraft PvP, mythic dungeons, and other endgame content. It really makes me envious that I live halfway across the world and can only catch this stuff on a live stream. There's other side things you can do WoW related too, like playing Hearthstone, which is Blizzard's virtual card game featuring popular heroes and characters from World of Warcraft and the WoW universe. I've never played it, but I hear it's super fun, and it's another pretty successful game for Blizzard. And of course, let's not forget the enormous amounts of lore and stories found on other mediums that simply enriches the Warcraft experience. There are scores of novels for lore and story hunters, there's the RTS games for those that want to see and experience the beginning of the WoW saga, and man, even a movie exists, which I really enjoyed watching and definitely want a sequel to. And I don't care what you think, I want another Warcraft movie, please. Number 3. Gradual improvements and modernization. Another thing that really impressed me about World of Warcraft is seeing how Blizzard is determined to improve the quality of their game to match current industry standards as time goes on. When I first jumped in, I'll admit, I expected to see a game that remained largely unchanged in many aspects such as aesthetics and quest designs from WoW's early years. That's simply not the case. For starters, we've already talked about the bits and pieces that WoW has modernized over the past few years, such as character models, combat animations, and even leveling progression in the form of zone scaling. These things are important to rework over time, especially in today's MMORPG landscape, because in my opinion, players these days are used to the new, the flashy, and there's a larger demand for MMORPGs to bring fresh gameplay and modern ideas to their game as opposed to remaining classic. And to be very fair, WoW and Blizzard didn't need to do it. It's an established household name, it's a franchise, it's a McDonald's, a Starbucks, or Google or Facebook of the MMO world, and it makes so much money from millions of players that they can pretty much say, nope, we're not changing a damn thing. But they have, and they are, with better visual storytelling from expansion to expansion, and by introducing more voice acting to increase story immersion, and even freshening up the gameplay and progression with ideas that modern MMOs have introduced. This is WoW holding their own against the other 3 to 4 big narrative-driven MMORPGs out there, and saying, hey, whatever you can do, we can do it too. And while I'm all for modernization of newer content, let's not forget there are a lot of players that prefers the game when it was at vanilla, and fair play to Blizzard for acknowledging that, and for giving these folks what they want, which is an official WoW Classic server. I might just review that too. Having said all that, there are still many areas in the game that, having played WoW now, I feel that Blizzard could look at for a revamp. For example, I think the game is severely limited when it comes to character customization. There's only a handful of facial choices and hair that's been there since the beginning, which means that as a new player, you'll probably bump into a lot of other folks that look just like you. There's no editing of body shapes and height, and the real kicker for me was the outfit and cosmetic system. Look, the collection system in WoW is amazing. Every new piece of rare gear you find will be added to an account-wide collections panel, and you can visit a transmorgifier in major hubs to edit the individual looks of your character, from head to toe and even weapons using the pool of item skins from your collection panel. I just can't believe that you can't dye them. How? It's 2018. WoW's outfitting system lets you collect raid sets or gear sets, which are for the most part awesome looking and color coordinated. But if endgame and farming raid sets is not something you enjoy doing, you're gonna have to mix and match random pieces from everywhere based on their color. While the system in general is convenient for players, not being able to pick and choose colors for what you've unlocked seems a little backward and draconian. I'm gonna get a lot of heat for saying this, but when it comes to cosmetic customization, other games do it better. And it's something WoW should reconsider, I think, considering there's thousands and thousands of items in-game that are just begging for a dye system, which can also apply to mounts and pets, since that's becoming a huge collection progression in itself. Number 2, let's talk about story and narratives in World of Warcraft. Does it have an engaging main story, and is it any good? Storytelling, at least in my opinion, is a big part of the Warcraft universe. I played the RTS games when I was younger, and that's one of the things that got me hooked. This insane tale about two different factions that are both good and evil in their own ways, and how they need one another despite that animosity to overcome a larger threat. Now throw in some neutral dude with a prophecy and that excellent RTS gameplay, and that's a great recipe for a great game. I came into World of Warcraft knowing quite a bit about that backstory, and I was not disappointed to find that the characters and threads of that premise continues in this MMORPG. As a new player, some knowledge of the story and lore outside the MMO would help increase the narrative factor for your enjoyment, but it's not necessary at all. Picking a faction when you begin introduces you to the starter zone of your race and faction, which is pretty cool. From then on, you'll move on and progress from zone to zone, discovering scores of zone quests that has really good stories about what's going on in those maps and how you can help the characters you encounter along the way. The stories within these quests usually unfold over a series of quests within a quest chain, and the climax and penultimate quest in an arc usually rewards a higher rarity item, in addition to leading you into a dungeon for more stories as well. This is probably what you'll experience in terms of main story in the vanilla game up until you hit the first few expansions, which is where the storytelling picks up for the better. When you reach 2012's Mists of Pandaria expansion though, you'll truly see how Blizzard begins to improve its world storytelling through the usage of more in-game cinematics, better voice acting, and other gambits. 2014's Warlords of Draenor steps it up a notch, as players will begin to see a cohesive, overarching main quest arc that was previously missing from earlier expansions and content. Quality of the cutscenes and in-game cinematics too started to get modernized, and on top of that, the faction stories became more emotive, and the game isn't afraid to chop off the heads of a few main characters in the Warcraft universe to raise the stakes and get you further invested in the story of the expansion. What I really enjoy about WoW storytelling is that it isn't tied to an existing IP or franchise, and it is its own thing, which allows the game to be original. And you can definitely see that in the writing, the setting, and the tones of the quests and characters. But if you ask me to sum up WoW's story, I can't, because it's impossible. There's so many narratives and story quests that you'll play through that furthers along the agendas, the conflicts, and the resolutions of these two factions, the Alliance and the Horde in the world of Azeroth. And that's what's great about WoW. You will definitely at many points throughout the game play through and experience the shaping of your faction as it seeks to explore new continents and worlds and combat old threats in the form of the Legion, for instance. And through the various expansions, central key characters become iconic villains that you can certainly buy into as a real reason for fighting for yourself and for your faction. I guess if I had to sum it all up, the epitome and the heart of WoW storytelling is right there in the name of the game. This is the World of Warcraft. Azeroth is a persistent online world where stories, characters and players have been evolving and progressing for 14 years and counting. As a new player coming to the game now, you do see remnants of that in the older zones, and it's really exciting to be at the thick of things in the current expansion once you know and are up to speed about all that's happened in this world from vanilla to every expansion since. And if that doesn't keep you interested and invested in seeing what else is in store for this world and its faction that the players represent, not a whole lot will. Number 1. Value for money. Alright, let's get to the big question. Is World of Warcraft worth the monthly subscription? Short answer, yes. Long answer, when it comes to WoW, there's definitely a feeling that you know exactly what you're paying for once you get a first character to level cap. We've already talked about the crap ton of content and progression available to you, in addition to the huge replayability factor thanks to its plethora of race and class combinations. There's so many zones to play through as well, and now with scaling introduced, as a new player there's just so much you can do in game that'll offer you plenty of value, assuming you've got that time to burn. And if you have plenty of that, you probably won't even have to pay real money for your future subscriptions, as you can farm gold in game to buy a WoW token off the auction house. Even then, it is a quality game, and that quality reverberates throughout everything that World of Warcraft does. It doesn't do things halfway, at least in my experience, so expect to see none of the usual free-to-play MMO tropes in here, obviously. You're also paying for stability, an important component and a luxury that not many other MMORPGs out there have. There are no concerns about wondering if and when the game's going to be shut down due to low populations, or worrying about if and when there's going to be new content. With World of Warcraft, these things are a given, there's no worry. As a premium service, WoW does treat the game as such, with consistent weekly maintenance schedules that last no longer than an hour to ensure that the game remains up and running for the millions that play it. I definitely think that for what you pay monthly, the amount of stuff you can do in this world is worth the asking price, in my opinion. So if you haven't checked out World of Warcraft before, should you play it or avoid it? My friends, do yourselves a favor and play this game up to the current expansion. I've had an incredible experience seeing how the content, the gameplay, and systems have evolved from vanilla to the first expansion and to every subsequent expansion since in a period of 2 months. And that's made my outlook on MMORPGs as a whole that much richer. Don't let the game's age fool you. It's classic where it needs to be, and it's definitely modern and up to date with its ideas and execution in terms of present content. The future is exciting for WoW, and as a new player, I definitely want to see where it goes with the upcoming Battle for Azeroth expansion, not just for the continuation of the story and the progression of my class, but for the MMORPG as a whole. And there you have it, folks. That concludes my thoughts and in-depth analysis about World of Warcraft from a new player perspective. For existing players, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And please share this video if you have that one friend that hasn't played World of Warcraft for some reason, and if you really want him or her to join you in game. Don't forget to hit the like button for the love of Warcraft, and feel free to subscribe to my channel for more MMORPG reviews and content. There's a lot more MMORPGs I have yet to play, and I do intend to review as many of them as possible. A big shout out to everyone who's joined me live on the leveling streams over the past 2 months. Your company means a lot to me. I also want to say a big thank you to my patrons on Patreon for making this review possible. MMORPG reviews like these take a lot of time and effort, and if you want to support the content and get access to behind the scenes stuff and check out how these reviews are made, check out my Patreon, and you can find links to that above and in the description box below. Your support is much appreciated. Once again, I'm Adrian, and I thank you for watching. For the Alliance. Hey, welcome to the end screen. If you've made it this far, it means you've watched the entire video, and I thank you very much for that. If you want to watch more videos, you can click the cards at the bottom here, anyone would do. And you can subscribe to my channel by hitting the big round button here to get notifications on all my latest videos. See you guys in the next video.